The Internet of Things is becoming an increasingly growing topic of conversation. It is a concept that not only has the potential to impact how we live, but also how we work. But what exactly is Internet of Things? What impact is it going to have on you? Well, broadband internet is becoming more widely available. The cost of connecting is decreasing. There are more devices being created with Wi-Fi capabilities and sensors that are built into them. Technology costs are going down, the smartphone penetration is skyrocketing, and all of these are creating a perfect storm for the IoT. This is the concept of basically connecting any device with an on and off switch to the internet. This includes everything from cell phones to coffee makers to washing machines to headphones, lamps, wearable devices, and almost everything else that you can think of. Can you imagine the amount of data that tiny sensors would be creating? Can you imagine when these sensors and devices go at an enterprise scale, how much processing and internet bandwidth is required? There are a number of services that can assist and drive end-to-end solutions for IoT on Azure. Two of the core Azure IoT service types are IoT Central and Azure IoT Hub. In the upcoming videos, we'll understand what is IoT Central and what is Azure IoT Hub, and also possibly do some demonstrations of them. Azure IoT Hub is a managed service which is hosted in the cloud. Now, this acts as a central message hub for bidirectional communication between your IoT application and the devices it manages. You can use Azure IoT Hub to build IoT solutions with reliable and secure communication between multiple millions of IoT devices. You can connect virtually any device to your IoT Hub. IoT Hub supports communication from the device to the cloud and from cloud to the device. That means it will support multiple message patterns, file uploads, and reply request methods to control your devices. IoT Hub monitoring will help you maintain the health of your solution by tracking events such as device creation, device failures, and device connections. IoT Hub has the capability to connect to multiple IoT devices. So you can manage industrial equipment such as manufacturing, tracking valuable assets in healthcare, and monitoring office building usage. In the next demonstration, we'll see how you can add an IoT device to Azure IoT Hub. To do so, we'll be simulating a device called as Raspberry Pi so that it can then send signals to the cloud-based IoT Hub. At this time, I'm logged into my Azure portal. Now I've just searched here with this term called as IoT, and I get this two options called IoT Central Applications and IoT Hub. I just clicked on this IoT Hub and landed in this place where I can either click on this Add button or this blue button called Create IoT Hub. Now when you click on this, it will take you to another blade where you gotta fill up these options one by one. So the objective is to create an IoT hub so that other devices like Raspberry Pi, Node MCU devices, or other kinds of IoT devices can then get connected to this particular hub. Once the devices get connected, you will have the ability to monitor those devices using IoT Hub. The subscription is pay as you go. I'll go ahead and create a new resource group called Developers. Click on OK. I'll select West US region, just leave it the way it is, and then give it a name that is unique to my IoT Hub. Call it as IoT Hub in US West. Probably this is unique, okay? And then you can size and scale depending on the number of devices you may want to configure. You will choose the pricing and scale tier from this. It's always good to look at the updated documentation by clicking on this hyperlink. Depending on the number of devices you want, depending on the number of messages, message routing, IoT edge, and the monitoring you need, you may want to pick and choose a particular scale tier. At this time, this is just a basic environment, hence I will select a F1 free tier environment. With that, I'm going to get 8,000 messages per day. That means my devices and cloud can send back and forth 8,000 messages together. With that, I'm not going to paying anything. It's just 0.00. I have got these following features along with F1 free tier. Next, if you're happy with this, just click on review and create, It will validate these options and then let that IoT Hub get created for you. It should not take more than 3 minutes to get this created. It's pretty quick. So I'll pause this video for a minute, and once this is ready, we'll get started again. Okay, so now that it is ready, I'll click on Go to Resource. And looks like I've got the IoT Hub in US West created. Absolutely healthy and fine. And now the objective is to add an IoT device. To add an IoT device, you've got to scroll down to the bottom and then click on IoT Devices and then click on New. All right, so you can just give any name here. Let's say Raspberry Pi. But if it is your watch, clock, refrigerator, washing machine, anything that is IoT enabled, if you'd like to give a particular name to it, you can do so. All right, I'll leave these options and I'll explain what these are later on. And I'll click on Save. Now this is saved and ready, so I can have a real physical Raspberry Pi device connected and let the sensors send the data to Raspberry Pi device. If I click on it, you will have the options to create a connection string between that device and the IoT Hub. So I've got this primary key, secondary key, a connection string which you may want to choose and provide it to the Raspberry Pi to make a successful connection. Because I cannot show you a real physical box, I will choose a Raspberry Pi simulator. To do so, all you gotta do is go to Google and type Raspberry Pi simulator. I just typed for Raspberry Pi simulator in Google and got the search results. The one that I'm interested is the one that is posted in GitHub. So I'll click on it and it will take me to a page with a Raspberry Pi interface. For those who are curious to know what Raspberry Pi is, I would suggest you to go to Amazon.com and then type Raspberry Pi there. Now, that is a real physical device which looks like a microchip and linear integrated circuit that has connections going back and forth to 4 USB ports. It has a very small CPU, but yet powerful yet for the device. It has sensors, it has an HDMI port and several connections that make it a mini computer. Okay, so now that we have a simulator opened up, I'll click on close right here and I have to look for a place where I can have the connection string. Now line number 15 here shows me the connection string. Okay, so all I have to do is get the connection string from the Raspberry Pi IoT Hub and paste it here and let this run. Now just to give you a brief overview of this little box here is a Raspberry Pi. Like I was saying, it has 4 USB ports, 2 here and 2 here. This is a Ethernet port where you can connect your RJ45 connector. This is an audio out connector. And this little white strip is where you can connect a camera, like you see here closely. Notice it's written camera right here. This is an HDMI port which you can connect your external HDMI compatible monitor or a TV. This is a power supply, and this is where you can connect your MMC card for the operating system. There are a couple of pins here which will be called as general purpose input output pins, which can be connected to different kinds of sensors. Now here for lab purposes they have used something called as a breadboard here. This white box is called as a breadboard, and you are connecting the breadboard to a sensor here, specifically a temperature sensor. And as soon as the signal is sent out to this sensor, this little LED blinks. And that's what the code here says. So we're trying to determine the temperature and the humidity in their environment. Of course, it's not gonna send you real temperature, but it is just a simulation, hence it is really in a controlled environment. So let's get started. I will go ahead and copy the connection string from the Azure portal and paste it here. Okay, so click on this. And my primary connection string is as follows. So I'll copy that. Okay, I just copied it, and then I will go to the Raspberry Pi simulator and paste it here. Okay, there you go. So that is my connector. The host name is IoT Hub in US West, and then that's the fully qualified name connecting to the Raspberry Pi, and that is the shared key for authentication purposes. Alright, so let's go click on this little run button, which will simulate certain values and take those values to the cloud. If you notice on the bottom right hand side, it is simulating certain values, 29, 26 in humidity, and every time it generates a number, the LED on the top left hand side blinks, and this code will let you do that. So if you're really interested in this, I would suggest you to go ahead and procure or get a device from Amazon. It's available for cheap. It's like $35, and it also comes with breadboard and sensors as well. So I suggest you to go ahead and look out for a deal on the internet which will give you the whole package to play with those IoT sensors and get that information rolled out to the cloud platform. Okay, so looks like the Raspberry Pi is sending information to the cloud because we have set the connection string to the cloud-based Azure device. Okay, and this is being stored right here. I will stop this simulation and then go to Raspberry Pi here under IoT Hub, and let's see where those values are. Now, if I scroll down to the bottom, under monitoring section, you have metrics. If I click on those metrics, you gotta go ahead and generate certain metrics for myself. Now, I've been doing on and off with the Raspberry Pi quite a few times just to see the data simulation, data it sends to the Azure portal here, and I could see that there's certain graphs that are generated here. I also played around certain metrics to add and remove the right set of metrics here, and you can see that the values are being generated. It tells us about the total number of messages sent, connected devices, total device data usage, patterns, etc. You can of course go ahead and add your own metrics from this button here, and there are a lot of metrics to see for. Now, depending on what your vendor recommends, you may want to pick and choose these metrics from this drop-down menu. The objective was to show you how data can flow from real physical devices to the Azure IoT Hub and how IoT Hub can handle this data. Now, this data can be temperature information, sensors information, or any other information that's being sent from your watches, refrigerators, washing machines, cars, navigation devices, thermal systems, etc.